conference and use their app. It's just like that. It's awesome. So make sure you download that, and when you do that, after each session that you attend, you can do your session evaluation and give us feedback, which is super helpful when we're planning the conference each year. Also, there's a QR code for all of the handouts today. If you go to the ISCA booth, it is there, and I also can leave this out on the table up here after the session if you want to just scan this. If you have like a newer version of a phone, it's not, less than 5 years old, you don't even need an app to scan these anymore. You can just use your phone camera and just hold it in front of this, and it should ask you, do you want to open this website? So then you say yes. So today we have a whole fabulous team to present for us. So we have Shalmer Thompson, and I'm going to do horribly at this, I'm so sorry. Gemilette Delgado, okay, Alexis Jonikin, Jacob Miller, Jasenia Perez, and Devin Sangster. Close? Yes? Okay. Okay, thank you so much.
Welcome. Glad that you made it. It's nice to see some familiar faces from my classes in the past. I'm Shalmer Thompson. I'm a professor at IUPUI in the School Counseling Program. And I am most pleased to present, along with my students, some ideas that have been fully talked about and where they had to wrestle with a lot of important questions about education and inclusion and equity. So we're really excited to be here, so thank you for coming. I'm going to start by sharing a slide that one of our presenters, Devin Sangster, had shared with us. And it was of a videotape that he saw. It was a YouTube. And by the way, if you're interested in receiving copies of the PowerPoint slides with this link, we have a sign-up sheet back there. And we also have hard copies of the handout. And you were right about that QR link. It's there too. So slide really resonated for all of us when we read it, because it was a lecture by a man named Dan Siegel, and he was talking about the importance of understanding the mind and what feeds the mind, what nourishes the mind. And during one of his visits to a country in Africa, he visited extensively throughout the world to conduct this research. What he found among the tribes people in Namibia, was that they were very happy. They seemed very, very pleased. And this is despite a lot of problems that they experienced. And when asked, through a translator, what is it that makes you all happy? And the response that was given was, we belong. We belong to each other. We belong to the earth. And to him, as he's kind of combining that with his research on the mind and then brain development in particular, he's saying that what we know from all the research is this relational aspect is very important, that people really do need a sense of belonging, to belong to one another. So it resonated with us because we believed that when we hear about all the problems that go on, especially with issues of equity, how some groups are not faring so well in academic settings as well as others, there's a dynamic that goes on, and it's of course very complex. But the one, I guess, a shared thread in that is this issue of belonging. Do we truly belong? How do we achieve that? So it's also something that's talked about by a lot of other people, but it's mindfulness also goes along with this. So we wanted to tackle this issue of abiding state initiatives, as well as simultaneously transforming environments to achieve equity. So what you'll hear is not your garden variety programs where you do something here and you tinker with there. These are programs that beg the question of resources. We need resources, and resources may be channeled in ways that can be considered controversial. It may seem like there is favoritism or too much going on, but what we know through history, we look at all the disparities throughout this country and in Indiana, and I'm talking about disparities by social class, by race, those intersection of both, we have some pretty deep-seated problems. And we think they are really very real and not all that mysterious strategies for addressing it and dealing with it. So we are trying to tackle that. When we say abiding by state initiatives, we're talking about those initiatives that are in favor of students achieving highly and making sure that we can provide the resources for students to achieve highly, every student, no exceptions. Now, when those state initiatives are mentioned, they can be seen in contradiction to some of the realities, the resources that are not there, what resources are used for some things and not for others, the ways in which the state budget in Indiana has been created and diverting monies, or at least dividing monies in three directions: traditional schools, charter schools, private voucher programs, things that can be a contradiction to this idea of achieving this high, this goal of students, all students, doing well and thriving, not just surviving, but doing well in schools. So what you're going to hear then is this notion or these ideas of how we do that. And again, I want to point out that these are not your garden variety projects. And the groups, the members of this team will talk about that. So one of the things that my students who are here, and I continue to talk about this, are probably familiar with, is the idea of true generosity. What we are striving to do is to express or convey a truly generous counseling unit who work as leaders, consultants, outreach people. Truly generous is a concept that was used by Paulo Freire, who was a Brazilian educator, who said that people who are conformists, are kind of conforming to systems, conforming to a status quo, and that's not calling anybody names here, it's something that we can all certainly adopt. But as we move beyond this idea of feeding into a status quo and instead being truly generous, not being falsely generous, that means that maybe by being truly generous, it means there are going to be some real substantive changes that might not feel like it's going to benefit you anymore if you were benefited in any way. But in the long run, it'll benefit the greater whole. It doesn't mean that those who it doesn't benefit as much as it used to don't get benefits at all. We care about everybody's success. But we want to point out the people who continue to be left behind. Much of what the projects are about come from the observations of the members in schools. The observation that there is a large number of Latina students in a middle school who are hurting themselves, harming themselves, who are mutilating themselves, and going through all kinds of issues with other signs of symptoms of depression. To understand that there are communities that are deserts, food deserts, that where there aren't healthy foods and produce in particular are not readily available. Again, this is not the idea of merely putting a garden up or anything. It's the idea of trying to insist that our students learn about the things that are going on in age-appropriate ways, and that school counselors have a very big part of that, especially in comprehensive school counseling programs. If you've read the latest ASCA model, the great emphasis is on advocacy. The great emphasis is on looking at equity. And we are going to present ways in which it's done, and it takes a lot of courage, quite frankly, because there's going to be a great deal of pushback. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to the team. I want to introduce you to them all together, then our first group will come out. Okay, so I'll start here. This is Jacinia Perez. Alexis Jonathan, Devin Sangster, Jacob Miller, and Jamalet Delgado. Okay, and Jacinia and Jamalet will be our first presenters.
Thank you everyone for coming. Again, I'm Jacinia or Jessie. So part of it that related to the first slide is, in America, do you belong? And that was an issue that I had during high school. I went to Huron High School, which is a charter school downtown. It had just opened. I felt like I did not belong there whatsoever. I was maybe one of the 5 Latino students overall, no type of school representation for me. And so when I started working at Fall Creek Valley Middle School for my internship, I started seeing something. And it became the same case over and over. And we were actually working on a project for Dr. Thompson's class, and it just worked perfect, because this is what I was experiencing. And so this is just a little bit about that. So we're going to talk about self-harm among adolescents, focusing on Latino students. So 1 in 4 teenage girls will report harming themselves, compared to 1 in 10 boys. The top races of Native Americans, Hispanics, and whites, then blacks and Asians.
So just a little bit about possible signs of self-injury that are important to be aware of. First is unexplained cuts in either arms, legs, stomach, possession of sharp objects as shards of glass, knives. I've even had students that have used keys, or continually wearing clothing that is not appropriate for the weather, like when it's really hot outside, you have long sleeves, or we're not taking the long sleeves off for a gym class, for example. And the last would be noticing evidence of self-injury in students' creative writing, in their speech, in journals, art projects, stuff like that.
One of the cases that I had, the girl would take off the Sharpie part of the sharpener, because she didn't have no other type of tools to do it. Because, you know, parents were trying to help her, or at school, but she still figured out ways to find a way to
Sharp objects.
to find sharp objects. So some of the challenges that Latino students are facing right now: achievement gap, poverty, language barrier, limited opportunities to fully participate in activities, acculturation, immigration, deportation, that is one of the top topics going on right now, prejudice and discriminations in schools.
So all these topics, with good reason, can weigh over students' minds, even when they're very personal to them. School representation is a big topic present in students' lives. I'm from Puerto Rico. I came here 5 years ago, and I came like as an adult, as a college student, and for me, I never expected it to be like a culture shock. But coming here, I just found myself being underrepresented. For the first time, I felt like the other. I felt like I didn't belong. So I feel like this is a very personal topic for me. And if you read here, underrepresentation of Hispanic and Latino school personnel has been reported as one factor that's negatively affecting the success of Latinos in school. Like, for example, when there's about 13.3 million Hispanics enrolled in U.S. education, only 7.8 of teachers represent that number. So you have 26% of all students are Hispanic, but then they don't see themselves represented in the staff around them or the people around them in the educational setting.
Family involvement is a big one, and I still see it. I see it in my elementary school. Even though we do have more Latino staff compared to the middle school, which is just 5 minutes away from where I work now. And in order for us to effectively assist our families, we need to reach out to the community, find ways that they can feel understood, because many of them do report that they're not listened to, they're not welcomed. Just had a mom who just came from Honduras. She couldn't fill out a free and reduced lunch. They were giving her a really hard time in the office. Kid is not going to school because she can't afford giving him money anymore. So that's just one of the things. English, just the English language is a big one, because they can't communicate within the schools. And that was a big part of Fall Creek last semester, is just helping out families, translating, and that took a lot of the big part. A lot of families came to me. The girls started coming to me. So due to the misunderstanding between the traditional expectation of the U.S. educational system and the Hispanic Latino culture, families and children often need assistance in learning how to navigate through the educational system. Like I said, just helping them how to fill out a simple application.
And even like I was commenting to Jesse, even if language is not a barrier, there's something so comforting about having somebody speak your own native language that in environments that can be hard to navigate sometimes and can be overwhelming, having that one person that knows your native language that you can communicate to can be so comforting, and you really find the sense of, okay, I belong here. So another topic that is one of the main topics that affects Latino students is obviously the topic of immigration. The migration process may lead to loss of social connections and relationships, lots of acculturation challenges when you come into the new country, and these are things that obviously are very personal because when I moved here, I never expected to face any of this because the U.S. culture is so mainstream over in Puerto Rico that I didn't expect it to be such a change for me. But these are things that I had to face myself that were, and I was an adult, and they were really hard for me still. Okay, we'll keep going. So with migration comes fear of, will I fit into my new school? Language barriers, will I be able to communicate with peers? Acculturation, you can be bombarded by suicide in the media as a whole in general for all students. And experiences like this may put students in vulnerable positions where they don't feel like they can connect to the people around them, and they may feel like they're not understood by the people that lead them in the educational system.
Alright, I was trying to pray on it.
So
So I'm just going to continue. Deportation as part of immigration. The National Women's Law Center shares that 1 in 4 Latina girls report harassment because of their last name or origin. And over 55% of Latina girls worry about a friend or family member being deported. Girls deal with immigration issues might suffer mental and physical health challenges from the worry associated with the fear of deportation, having to uproot and suddenly move, as well as experiencing discrimination. So there's a lot of fear of being returned to an unsafe home, fear of being incarcerated, fear of a loved one being incarcerated as well, being separated, and just that there's so many lack of resources due to undocumented statuses. Just this past July, a 13-year-old in New York committed suicide because she was being separated from her father. So just knowing that she was from Honduras, my family's from Honduras, it was very impactful. Thank God I don't have to deal with that. But still, there's that relationship, that relation, that connection that I can feel, you know, and I feel like it's just very important to bring it out there.
And I was saying, like, even for Latinos, like for me, Puerto Ricans have automatic citizenship. So I don't necessarily have to worry about all these issues, but the fact that they're going on in my own community and I have people that I know, they might be worrying about those same issues. Those issues also affect me, even though it's not directly. So we have the suggestions of a program called Empowering Señoritas.
So part of being in Fall Creek and learning their after schools program, they have one called GEMS. However, there wasn't, could you say, a Hispanic staff member that lead the program. And many of my girls didn't know English. So I thought about, okay, why can't we come up with an after school program that is targeted for these girls, you know, that they don't feel they belong or feel placed. So it's pretty much inspiring, empowering, and preparing young Latinas. It's a mentoring program that offers fun, positive weekly meetings, community service projects, and friendship building for middle school girls. And this could be, you know, high school and elementary, really. It could be once a week for 1 hour. We would like to bring in guest speakers, weekly learning activities, and family fun night. And the reason why I say family weekend fun, I would say, is because I kind of had a program like this during middle school, and the little time I could spend with my mom as a single mother was the best thing. Just going out there in the community, cleaning dogs, fine, let's do it, Mom, because that was time that I was spending with her. So I feel like it would be such a great idea to kind of include that into this program as well.
Because it's about being transformative, right? So it's not just about working with the students, but also working with the community and their own microsystems, their families, their friends. So why do we need Empowering Señoritas program? The entertainment industry has successfully penetrated most sectors of the workforce, and there are still challenges for Latinas to achieve representations. We're making a way. We're making progress, but there's still more to go when it comes to societal roles and stereotypes and all that. So this program would serve to inspire, encourage, support, and prepare young Latinas not just to be positive in their own environment and be prepared for their own environment, but when they go out into the world for their futures. And reaching Latina girls is important because Latinas face tough issues like the one we talked about, not just because of culture, like immigration, deportation, but they're Latinas, they're teenagers. They all go through, their struggles, like we all do. The Youth Risk Behavior Survey in 2017 states that 1 out of 5 Latinas in high school seriously considered attempting suicide. So that's important to note, that there is an urgency in getting programs like these out there. And in addition to immigration issues that greatly impact the Latino community, which makes the important part of the United States, we will also give a space for Latinas in school to have that safe space where they can talk about whatever's going on in their life, when they can talk about greater issues that's going on in their community and give them a sense of belonging. This program will also be kind of like that little push to get more representation in the staff for the students, because mentors and people that will be encouraging, yes, they can be from all races or ethnicities, but it's important that they have that representation, that they see themselves in the people that are inspiring them.
And these are just examples that we came up with, because I said it would be like a weekly learning activity, so every month has its own theme. So in August, ¿Quién soy yo? Who I am. September could be Presión de las Amistades, peer pressure, that happens a lot in middle school. October, bullying, relational aggression. November, cómo lidiar con nuestros sentimientos, how to manage our emotions. December, fortalezas y virtudes, strength and virtues. And so it goes on, just different themes that I feel like topics need to be taught to these girls. And I saw that it was missing, a missing piece, that they didn't have anybody to help them, to teach them.
And this could be just a start, like further directions of this could be reaching out to Latino boys or to other communities that have also been marginalized, so they also, and the communities overall, so they also have a safe space in the school that they can feel like they can be themselves and that they actually belong.
And like I said, I really love the monthly family activities, so like I said, they could clean up a park, go to an animal shelter, cook for homeless, and so it's just being able to engage our families in the community, be able to spend time with their child as well, and connect.
Thank you. Now we're going to go into greening the future.
Yes, and so that was Alexis and I's project, Greening the Future. Part of what we started this project from was we were looking at a specific school in Indianapolis that a lot of the kids there were living in poverty. Most of them lived in what the state defines as a food desert. So our title, Greening the Future, greening means just like the transformation of something. Creating your own biosphere, culture around the thing. It could be inanimate, it could be living. So we'll go more into that.
All right, so we're going to start, of course, with the problem. So we know that there is an inadequate access to healthy food. A lot of places in Indianapolis, they have food deserts, or there's a food swamp. And most of those times, there's a lot of unhealthy food.
And so our students aren't getting those things. We also know that our students are coming to school hungry, or they're improperly nourished. A lot of our kids get free or reduced lunch, and they come from that low SES status. And so because of that, we know that that's going to increase their anxiety, depression, and again, they will have a lower academic performance. We also know that neighborhood does shape their access to food. So for instance, transportation is an issue. I know a lot of students and their parents don't have cars, so it's harder to go to the store and get the food. And then too, of course, the food deserts. A lot of the students live in a food desert. They don't think they do, but according to the definition of it, they actually do end up living in one.
So why does this matter? Food impacts our mental health. And that's something that research has been proving a lot here recently, that foods high in fat cause the brain to become inflamed, and this inflammation can cause things such as Alzheimer's, depression, even schizophrenia. We know that there are different diets that you can take that can help reduce this inflammation of the brain and therefore reduce the risk of certain mental illnesses. So yes, as counselors, food is directly something that we need to be aware of and we need to be helping with. And then the quote on the bottom is something that I just really like. Barbecue may not be the road to world peace, but it's a start. When you think about having a barbecue, everyone's coming together, everyone's sharing food. You come together and you eat as a community, and that solves a lot more problems than you really think, and it brings a lot more people together. So school-based community gardens, these are just Band-Aid type solutions that we came up with. The reason they're a Band-Aid type solution is because it's not the end-all be-all. This isn't going to fix everything. But it's a start, and it's a way to get kids in your school participating in things. It is an educational tool. This project is used more as like a reflection on the past and how we got to this point. We live in communities where there's dirty water, soil that's contaminated with things that will kill us if we ingest it. I know babies who've gotten lead poisoning from playing out in the dirt. And the majority of the food eaten in these areas is all processed chemicals, and it's not what we call real food. So when you're just eating things that are out of a plastic bag, you're not giving your body what it needs to produce the right chemicals. You're not giving your body what it needs to grow and develop. So our idea was, build these raised bed gardens like the one pictured here. And this is kind of a hack to bypass contaminated soil, or if you don't have any green space around your area, these are isolated containers where you can grow food. They can be very inexpensive, especially utilizing community resources, bringing in community partners, having someone donate the soil, having someone donate building supplies, and then you have the kids build these themselves. Gardening can be very therapeutic, and it can bring the community together. It also gives kids a sense of purpose in their communities. A lot of times we find that kids get involved in the wrong things because they don't feel a sense of purpose, so they go out looking for it. If we give them a sense of purpose by being able to feed their families or feed their neighbors, you will not even realize the impact that that can have on them, of having this responsibility of, hey, I'm bringing something to the table. And I think, if we explored this idea more and obviously grew upon it, we could see a really big difference potentially.
All right, so why counselors? So we know as counselors, we do some outreach, we do some leadership, and we also do some consultation when it comes to like our students, our school, and their families. So we know that school counselors, they have the ability to improve the brain functioning by providing that nutritious food for our students. And we also know that kids can sometimes lose their focus when their minds are distracted by their parents' financial struggles or think about their next meal. One of my favorite quotes is Maslow before it blooms. We don't take care of the students' main needs. We're not going to get them to lead that, have that academic success that we want our students to have. All right, so this is a pathway to our pathways. We know that the class of 2023, they have to have those 3 graduation requirements, and one is for them to choose a pathway. One, of course, being project-based, service, and work-based. So, of course, this fulfills all 3 because it is project-based, because we're going to work with people outside the classroom, and it's public work that can be seen by numerous people. The next thing is that it's service-based, because our students will be able to take care of the garden and then be able to donate those items grown to either food pantry or food bank or within students at their own school. And then the last thing is work-based. Students are getting those skills that they need just to be able to go about life and just have the life skills of how to grow things.
So a big part of this project is sustainability. And this doesn't just mean environmental sustainability, but the longevity of this program. I think we see a lot of times where we, as counselors or people in the school work really hard to get something set up. We do everything it needs to take to get started, and we put it out there, and it goes for a year or two and then kind of dies off. And that's because the people who need it need to be involved with it from the beginning. When people have their own chips in the pot, per se, they're more willing to keep things going. And they have a sense of ownership of that project. This isn't just something someone else is doing for them, but it's something that they've done for themselves and the people around them. So for us, that's what sustainability means. Obviously, growing the food in a sustainable way, and all of that is good as well, but it's more about the longevity of the project. It's more about building a culture around the project. If this project gets talked up and the community's involved with it, especially when there's a community that needs this, people are going to keep coming back to this year after year because they see the benefits of it. They see, the yield that they're getting from this. So the impact on the future is limitless. It's how far you want to take this project. The goal is not to supply every family with all the food they need. That's out of the question here. Like we said, this is a Band-Aid type solution to a bigger environmental problem. But helping out putting food in kids' bellies so they can have better mental functioning, so that they can come to school and be able to participate more. Giving them a purpose in their communities and a purpose at home by helping out their parents at home. These gardens can be implemented in any high school across the country. It has the ability to be a very revolutionary project with the implications of changing communities and food culture, and the fact that we don't see too many high schools that give back to the community in this way by literally feeding the community that's around them.
And so we're going to leave you guys with this quote, and it says, through gardening, students become responsible caretakers. They have an opportunity to engage in agricultural practices on a small scale, learning about the responsibilities and impacts of land cultivation. They explore the web of interactions among the living and non-living players that sustain life. By doing so, they develop a greater understanding of the natural world. Basically, we just want students to take charge of their environment and just take care of it, and just to be leaders, not only in their school, but for their communities and for their families as well.
So before I go into deep depth about this slide, this is the last one, I just kind of want to take a moment just to say exactly why it was that I decided to even join this presentation in the first place, because I didn't know anything about it up until my friend Jacob told me about it last year, and just in passing. He told me about this presentation and how they wanted to have a group just talk about this particular topic, and how he felt that that would be a great addition to the group. After first thinking about it, the first thing I thought in my mind was, absolutely not. I don't want to do it. I got enough issues on my plate as it is, from internship to finishing up the grad program. But I thought about Jacob the first time actually being in a class and learning from him and growing with this guy from my first class to the last, and finding somebody that's not only now just a person that I consider a classmate, but somebody I consider a real deep friend and a brother. I thought about Alexis, somebody who I went through and I even had an internship place with, and how we went through the same experiences together, and how she's now more like a sister to me than anything else. I thought about Jamalette and Jasini, and how many times we've went through class, and how many times we've gone through the same program with teachers and helped each other out in different areas. And suddenly, saying no seemed more and more unlikely. And I see now more of a purpose, that they gave me an opportunity to belong to something, which is exactly what this presentation is all about. So I want to say thank y'all for that, more than anything. So what does this mean for school counselors? In my opinion, there was a presentation that I did, and even though it's around the time for holiday season, during the Counsel season, there is a theme called Ujama, where it's the theme about family and belonging to a community and to belonging to a people as a whole. and how much that goes into creating a sense of purpose with not just yourself, but the community as a whole, and how that makes your entire society great. And these presentations, I think, does a lot of that. The lack of representation in schools, microaggressions from teachers and staff, and lack of knowledge and inclusion of different cultures contribute to the lack of safe space where students are able to grow and develop necessary academic and social skills. I could imagine how being a Latina student and worrying about their family possibly being deported and not knowing why. I couldn't imagine the stress that that would place on somebody's heart and how that could affect somebody's ability to even think about trying to learn when you don't even know if you'll have a family when you go back home. It's hard to think about your student who you think may be a problem child who's running around in the city, in the classroom, throwing a tantrum, but in reality, you're trying to figure out exactly why is it that he's having such of these hard times, but he's hungry. He's not sure of whether or not when he goes home, he's gonna have a meal to go to. And how does that play into his role? So the things that we're doing are not just affecting the students as it is, in your classroom, but as a society. We're seeing so many times now that there are so many systems in place that are creating an environment where it's almost impossible for your student to learn, from a school shooting that may happen by month, from the deportation and migration issue that we're seeing day to day, from food deserts and how that's placing such an important role in our community when thinking about healthy alternative foods for our children to eat. There are so many things that are now coming up that are now pretty much making it harder and harder to teach and to create an environment where learning should be sustainable. So while these programs and things may not fix everything, they're in a very important, great start to doing some much needed work and helping our community. With the inclusion of culturally responsive environments and programs such as empowering senoritas and school-based community gardens, schools will be able to foster such environments that lead to success of all students. When you're thinking about it, think how important it could be for a young Latina student to be able to go into a group of people who maybe from different areas, maybe from different countries, but to come to a place where they all have the same kind of sense of belonging, the same kind of sense of issues that they all go through, and how they can share that with each other, and they can share that with their family and their community, and how then as a community they can come together and start to empower each other by going and doing workplace areas while they're cleaning up parks, while they're creating a system where they're teaching each other, trying to help each other through navigate through the educational plane. When you're thinking about a student who may live on the wrong side of town, who doesn't have the kind of resources that somebody else may have, whether on the east side or the west side, where they may have a food desert, and we're seeing such a rise in teen violence and teen shootings and things of that nature. I had a student the other day come in distraught, crying, because his cousin was just shot and killed late at night, and how that affected him going through the rest of the day. And I'm seeing now how his grades are dropping. When you think of just what could society, what could this person be into, where they could belong. And so a school-based garden where not only creates a sense of a purpose, like my friend said, but also how much of a responsibility you would feel for actually putting food into your neighbor's hand, giving them the ability to have a fresh garden, to have fresh foods, and have that resource available to them, how important that is as a resource, and how that could create a sense of responsibility that makes them not even want to consider going out into the streets or doing anything of that nature when they have an opportunity to do something that's actually building the community and bridging people together. And that's what we want to try and do. It could be seen as a Band-Aid option, but it's a Band-Aid that could possibly turn into an antidote to a much bigger issue. And with these initiatives, we reject the nice counsel syndrome. I can't speak for everybody, but I know that I had a mini nice counselor in my day whose job essentially was to put me through and pass me along to the next class, to the next grade, to make sure that I did enough, that I didn't really need them, but enough that they know that, hey, I'm here for you if you need me or when you need me or whatever. We reject that nice counselor syndrome where we're just passing along the buck and we're just putting out fires. We want to be a place where we have a purpose. And I think that with these programs, we can actually achieve that. We're looking for a transformative approach where cultural systems and barriers are taken into account. As we previously stated, there are many systems in place culturally that are not giving everybody the equal opportunity to succeed, and that's a drastic problem. In a system where, in an educational field where students are required to do so much with so much less, there's no excuse for why we can't give them opportunity to do more and to be more, but we have to invest more into them, into where they are, and to meet their needs where they are, just as much as we're trying to raise them, raise their abilities academically. It's hard to think about a way that they can reach those goals when socially and emotionally they're drained, they don't have it, they're tired, they're hungry, they're lost, they're scared. These things are being done in such a crazy way that it's impossible to think in the formula of one plan to just kind of address every single thing. But by doing some of these things and giving them opportunities and making these a potential pathway, we're knocking out two birds effectively with one smooth stone. And so in order to achieve equity, we must look further than our own lenses and reach beyond in order to create an environment where all belong. Whether it's me belonging into this program, whether it's a student who wanted to join a football team, whether it's joining a frat or a sorority, whatever it is, you're so much better when you're a part of something, and you feel so much better when you're a part of something united than you could ever do anything divided or by yourself. And recognizing that and wanting to create a program that addresses that and meets the challenges that we all face head on as a community creates such a bigger, lasting impact than we can ever do apart. Thank you. And these are our contact information. As Dr. Thompson said in the back, there is a sign-up sheet that if you guys do get a copy of the slides, please feel free to sign in. And we're open to questions. Yes, ma'am.
So I work in a majority Caucasian, wealthy community. And so my main purpose is exposure and awareness and education. As a staff member, I'm participating in an equity walk next week where I don't know that we've ever done this before, but I think I'm going to walk through the building and just have that equity lens of, you know, what resources are available for our students. Do you guys have any suggestions on that?
I started a group recently I noticed that black boys get suspended the most. We know that. And so I started a group with the ESL teacher who's also black. And we call our program Men on the Rise. And so we got our high flyer boys. And once a week, we had it yesterday, once a week our boys come down and they basically get poured into. A lot of the boys don't have dads or a parent's missing, they're living with grandparents. There's a lot of anger in there. And so the boys are learning these various things, just like how to be a man, how to take care of yourselves, think about our behaviors. We had some of the boys in the group got into a fight, and the police were involved. And so this past week they talked about our decisions, you know, they impact our future. And a lot of the boys that resonated with them. And then last week, before last, the boys learned how to tie ties. So it's trying to figure out what the kids need for the different groups. So I know we have a few Asian kids at our school as well. My school is very diverse. We have 33 countries and 27 languages represented. And so we're just trying to get a glimpse of everything. And so for like our Asian students, we finally have a teacher who is of Asian descent. And so she just goes in and she just talks to the kids once a week. No one asked her to do this, but she just goes, talks to the kids, talks to the family. We have another guy who's of Indian descent, and he just talks to students and their families. So it's just trying to see like where the needs are and kind of looking outside. Like we have a very few amount of like white children who go to our school. So our main thing is just trying to see what they need. I always try to talk to kids when I'm counseling them or I'm doing my classroom lessons. I just ask teachers, what do you notice about your class, or what do you need help with? And I think that also too is just a good start, just seeing where the needs are, talking to administration and just going from there just to service those kids too. And then just calling community people around. I've written letters to several community organizers and partners trying to see if I can get them to come in. And we do have tonight at our school a town hall meeting, and it's basically they're trying to help our Latino families out. And so they're coming out, they have resources for our families, they have interpreters, they're just gonna try to help them and get those resources, but we have to reach out first and just see what's in our community and the surrounding communities in order to help those students out.
I think that a key word definitely is to be open to listen. Like for me, I've had to kind of go through my own experiences and my own privileges, even as a Latina, as it relates to others, and be able to really look at myself and see my life in contrast with others' lives and how I can learn from my own life and from others' lives too, and just having an open mind to see how I've been raised differently or where I've lacked in comparison to others, and just being able to listen and have that introspect.
So you were talking about like underrepresentation of like staff and faculty, and that's definitely, my school's a little bit more diverse than the rest of our corporation as far as staff, but even with that, we only have a handful of staff members that are individuals of color. And a lot of students who happen to be on my caseload are Latinas, Latino boys. I do have a lot of Black male students. I do a lot of the behavior counseling. So how, as a white woman, foster environments of belonging, but yet understanding my limitations, of understanding where they're coming from, their experiences, like understanding that I'm not going to 100% understand. So you mentioned inviting in like community members. Like, what other things would you say to like be aware of, and also maybe boundaries for me to have, like things not to speak to, but also maybe some things not to be afraid of to approach?
As a fellow white counselor, I mean, just be upfront with it. I mean, you know, say, hey, I'm a white woman and I do not have the life experience that you have. So I will in no way fully understand what you're coming through, but I'm a counselor because I have empathy. I have, you know, I can be there for you. I've read a lot, you know. I know what's going on out in the world, so you have, you know, your mind open to a little bit more things than maybe their classmates would. But just being very transparent and upfront with that. And I find a lot of students really respond well to that. And they just need somebody that's willing to listen and someone who can understand maybe a little bit more than their classmates or like other teachers. And so that's where us as counselors have to come into play and say, you know, I don't want to say no more than teachers, I don't mean it like that, but
I know what you mean.
yeah, you know, we've spent our lives dealing with people and who they are as, you know, persons in their community. So yeah, just being there, but being very open and transparent about the situation and about your level of understanding. Ask questions, you know.
To piggyback off of what he said, speaking as a black male who's been in many classrooms where I was the only black male in the classroom, nothing I could think is a little bit more frustrating than having a conversation and having somebody trying to relate to you, and then they say when they don't really, they say this and I don't think they mean any offense by it, but they say, I understand. I don't think people can really understand just kind of how frustrating that can be for somebody when you really don't share that same life experience. So being honest is the best policy. Be honest with yourself, be honest with the other person, because it's impossible for you to be who you are and to try and relate to that student where they are with the experiences that they have. But what you can do, like you said, is be open. I think that's the main thing, is being open to being wrong. I think that's why there's a lot of issues and a lot of kind of nuance in education, is there's so much timidness in being wrong and being afraid of being wrong and being challenged and not having their expertise challenged by somebody who may not have as much knowledge as you, but may have a little bit more different life experiences than you may have. So being open with that and being able to kind of give them a time to actually really share their experiences and be and just listen. You know, you'll find a lot more answers will come from them just being able to share their own life experiences and you just listening and generating ideas from them than anything that you could ever think about in a room full of board members who look like you?
And I think for me, where I'm at, I have a teaching background. And in teaching, they say it's all about relationships. And so even in the counseling thing, it's still all about that relationship. But I know for me, I just identify and I relate to my black students, my Hispanic students, because I grew up around black and Hispanics. And so when I was teaching last year and I had a little, white girl, I'm like, I don't know anything about what it is to be white. No offense to this little girl, but it's just me taking the time out. Hey, sweetheart, what do you like? Like, what's going on? And then she is a cheerleader now this year. And so just going to those events and games and just being present, the kids need to see you to know that you care. Because we can say that we care, we can nod our heads, show that empathy, minimal encourage, all those things that we learn in counseling school. We can do that, but I think us physically being there for a lot of our kids too says a great deal about how we're trying to learn about their experiences too. And then one thing I've also started incorporating is knowing students' love languages. So when I get kids one-on-one, I do that with them. And I just kind of have like a document going on of which kids need what. And so my kids who need that quality time, I just take that extra step. And I might bring my computer down, but I'll have lunch with them in the cafeteria. Or I just tell them to have lunch with me. I just try to get to see kids where they're at, because they all do come from different walks of life. Even like my refugee students, I just try to ask them what's going on. Tell me a movie you like or a song from their country, and just trying to understand and ask them for their perceptions, because then that goes such a long way. It speaks volumes when they see that you're trying to learn and that you're trying to care, and that yes, you do make mistakes. Like I have one girl, I'm trying to say her name for the longest, but she's being patient with me, and and she's like, thank you so much. I know you're trying. This is how you say it. Like, I'm sorry, I'm gonna get it. But they have to see that effort, and they have to know that you genuinely are there and that you genuinely care. Because we can say it, but we have to also show them that thing as well.
I'd say that's important too, is I don't think as professionals in a school, we admit to kids that we made a mistake and that we're sorry enough. I think that's something very important that they need to see, is even as adults, is saying, I messed up, like my apologies on that, and being transparent about the fact that, we made mistakes, and it's not just like, oh, well, let that roll off your shoulder because we're the adult,
We have a growing Latino population at our school, and it's a private school, and I don't think we have any Latina faculty or staff on campus, but we do have like Spanish teachers and a couple of parent volunteers who speak Spanish. We're running into a problem where we want to talk to these parents when it's kind of like a confidential type issue, and we don't know who to bring in to speak to the parents. A lot of the times they'll bring in a sibling or somebody who can translate for us, but not always everything we want to be said is getting across the right way. I actually work with kids with learning differences, and I'm thinking there's something there, but in talking to them and trying to explain like verbiage and like these concepts is kind of difficult. But then I don't quite know who to pull into that conversation that would be appropriate. Like, I don't know if the Spanish teacher needs to know everything about this kid. Any suggestion as to how we could handle that? Like, or an outside parent probably wouldn't be appropriate either.
That's a tricky situation because personally, I don't know a teacher. The biggest thing for us as school calendar is confidentiality, and like you said, using a sibling sometimes is not the best way.
Yeah, too much responsibility.
Too much responsibility, and like you said, just the wording.
There should be translators, like professional translators that you could call and they come in and have that first like relationship building with the parents so that they feel comfortable with the translator, and also be in the meeting and they can translate, and they're trained in translating, especially making the verbiage, explaining the verbiage, I would say, in terms that are simpler. And I feel like this is for overall parents. Like you have IEP meetings, 504s, having parents not be overwhelmed by all of the verbiage and actually making it into that everybody can understand.
Where do you find those people?
Does your school have or use Luna? Because that's one service that Luna?
Luna?
Yes, and so they have, I want to say like 50 languages, and you call them, and they're all trained and certified translators. And you call them on the phone. We've done meetings this way at my school. And you put on speaker or whatever. But Luna, they'll translate whatever the conference is. They're very, unbiased. They don't, pick sides. Or I know sometimes when we ask like our bilingual assistants to translate, they put into their terminology and they pick up the personality, and it's like, okay, but this is what we're trying to say. Right. But we use like Luna to help get our conversations across too. And I think if you had a teacher who works with that student, let's say that teacher was having, like the Spanish teacher was having an issue with that student, I will be okay with using that teacher because that teacher has a relationship with that student and should have a relationship with that family. So in that case, I would then use the teacher, but only if they have a relationship with that student or family. I wouldn't ask them if they're like a middle school, Spanish teacher. I wouldn't ask them to translate for a kindergarten teacher, a kindergarten kid. I would have them do a kid that they actually kind of know and work with.
Is there anything with like the school district that would have somebody?
Some school districts do. We have one guy that speaks Kinyarwanda, Swahili, Urdu, and he comes in twice a week. And so we schedule our meetings around when he's there. So his schedule during the week is for us to just kind of let them know, and then we let parents know, hey, we can do this language for you on these dates. But it's just, again, seeing what resources are available out there.
And I wanted to bring up another issue, and that is that, I mentioned before about transformation and that it would require some courage by people who are doing this and seeing things very different. So often, I know in the handout we mentioned this idea of imagine going into a place and seeing that people who are in the top echelon of like a hospital, the doctors and so forth, rather than being mostly white and then everybody else being mostly people of color or almost any setting, to really envision that these issues have a lot to do with some structural things that go on again and again and again. So we know that probably a very sensitive point to many people is the economic stratification that we have. So imagine that rather than calling on maybe volunteers or especially that there was a representation of Latina teachers, for example, that the community wasn't stratified as it is. So I think that some of these ideas are fine in the short term, but what if we were to take something?
It's difficult too, because they don't seem to be super interested in like working at our school. I feel like those type of people typically want to go to the schools where they feel like they can help more people.
Right.
But like we need that help now, and trying to find the people to come in is somewhat difficult.
Right. So there's no doubt at all that this is not a simple, and I'm not actually just targeting you, by the way. Yeah. No, I'm not targeting you. I just think that the idea, I wanted to bring up the issue as sort of to go another level, I guess. And that is to think, how can I envision a future where this can be a possibility? And maybe it would be region by region. Maybe in the region where it would be easy, where others would be difficult, but it could be, why don't we start a program in school that would encourage our Latina students to get involved in certain professions. So at the elementary level, and then at a district level, say, let's see what happens at the middle school, or in other words, those can be little projects where we start to envision that the issues that we see that relate to economic stratification and inequality, we see a path to seeing something different with regards to those kinds of things. Again, it's a sensitive topic because people are saying now you're talking about, possibly taking, jobs away from those who have been having jobs. The mentoring that goes on often goes by race, actually. So one of the things that I do with my students is I just keep pushing them. And everybody here is not only students, they're working, they have jobs, they're school counselors too. But to continue to push those things. Again, it's not going to turn on a dime. It's just about sort of coming to this idea of, if I believe in general that there is a need for people to feel a sense of belonging, and that a sense of belonging is going to occur when people can feel safe and that things are done equitably, or at least there's a pursuit of those kinds of goals, then what can I do? What little can I do? What groups can I work with in order to make those things happen? So with regards to any project. I know that there are many urban garden projects, for example, but the idea of saying we want to make this a persistent part of everything we do, we want everybody to be involved, the teachers maybe talk about the food justice issue, those kinds of things. If everybody can take a part in those things, then that's also envisioning a different future. So the use of the word transformation in the title, I know that's thrown around a lot, you know, transforming this and transforming that. But true transformation is really sometimes going to feel like it may hurt a little bit. It may be uncomfortable. And that's really what it should be doing, because the way things are going now is not to the benefit of a lot of people. So that's what I wanted to just to point that out. And I realized that we're probably out of time. Right. Okay, all right.
Thank
I
you so
appreciate
much.
it. And again, have a sign up.